No one panicked when the message came. It arrived wrapped in static, bouncing off 100 satellites before it finally settled into Earth's deep space monitoring system. The words were cold, calculated, and clear. We return to finish what began 6,000 years ago. Your resistance will be crushed. The declaration spread like wildfire, blinking on every screen, spoken in 100 tongues by digital news anchors who barely blinked. Yet the reaction from Earth was strange. No screams, no chaos, no mass evacuations. Just a silence. A knowing kind of stillness. Because humanity remembered. Not in the way you remember yesterday's dinner, or the name of a forgotten friend, but in their bones. In the whispers passed down through old bloodlines. In ancient ruins that had never been explained. The stories were always dismissed as myths. Creatures from the sky. Fires in the heavens. Civilizations wiped out without cause. Entire populations vanished overnight. Some said Atlantis was real. Some said the Sumerians met gods who didn't stay long. But what everyone agreed on, now, was this. Something had come before, and something had left. And now, it was coming back. But humanity wasn't what it used to be. Back then, they were just people with spears and prayers. Now, they were monsters in their own right. Humans had clawed their way into the stars, built machines that could rewrite DNA, colonized moons, and dabbled in artificial intelligence so advanced that most governments had to ban it. Some said Earth was no longer home to just humans. It was home to something more. At the edge of Saturn's orbit, deep inside the shadows of its largest moon, a massive object shimmered into existence. It was longer than 3 aircraft carriers and darker than space itself. It hadn't been built, it had grown. Its skin pulsed like breathing flesh. Inside that ship sat the Alien War Council, known as the Elders. Their faces were nothing like human, more stone than skin, with eyes like dead suns. And they were angry. 6,000 years, one hissed in a guttural language, translated through implants. They were supposed to die. We left them broken. Another elder, hunched and crusted with alien lichen, glared at the screen projecting Earth. We underestimated the infection. They thrived. They built cities over the bones we left behind. The High Elder lifted his hand. Silence fell. We do not warn again. This time, we erase them. He pressed a control. The countdown began. Earth had 72 hours. On Earth, in a mountain base carved into the Andes, Commander Thorne leaned back in her chair and stared at the alien message one more time. "You're scared," said someone behind her. Thorne turned. It was an old man in a lab coat, gray beard, eyes still sharp. "Not scared," she said, "just annoyed." He smirked. "So, what's the plan?" She stood and walked to the glass wall, looking out over the base rows of advanced weaponry, soldiers born and raised in low-gravity war zones, AI drones whispering through the air like ghosts. "They think we're the same species they left behind," she said. "We're not." No one on Earth was afraid because Earth wasn't waiting to be invaded. It was waiting for payback. The mountain base hummed with restrained fury. Screens flickered, data poured across translucent glass panels, and the distant thud of pulse rifles being loaded echoed through the reinforced halls. Commander Thorne moved through it all with silent intensity, her eyes not missing a single detail. Earth was mobilizing, but not in panic. In purpose. At the heart of the base, a vault buried half a kilometer beneath solid rock began to hiss open. Access to this part of the installation required more than clearance, it required silence. No names, no records, no cameras. Inside, the room was colder than the mountain outside. Not from temperature, but from what it held. 2 figures stood inside already, waiting. One was the gray-bearded scientist, the other a woman who looked younger than 20, yet her eyes carried centuries. She didn't blink much, didn't breathe deeply. "It's awake," said the scientist. Thorne nodded once. "Does it remember?" "No," the young woman replied. "But it's dreaming. Violent dreams. It knows something's coming. Something old. A deep, mechanical hum pulsed through the floor. They weren't just preparing weapons. They were waking them. Meanwhile, in orbit around Neptune, a small recon ship drifted silently toward the dark edge of the alien vessel. It was a suicide mission, but the pilot didn't seem concerned. He whistled while guiding the ship, one hand on the stick, the other flipping through old jazz tracks stored on a dirty drive. No backup, no AI, no failsafes. He didn't need them. The man's name wasn't known. People just called him Stitch, part legend, part lunatic. He'd served in 3 off-world wars, 2 prison revolts, and 1 accidental first contact that ended with a treaty and a bar fight. "Getting cozy," he muttered, as the alien vessel loomed larger in his viewport. It didn't reflect light, it swallowed it. The hull writhed gently, like it was breathing. Alive. He slowed the ship to a crawl, holding just beyond the range of active sensors. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to see. "All right, ugly. Let's see what you're hiding." He deployed a series of micro-drones, silent, carbon-threaded, AI-directed. They slid through space like slivers of shadow, invisible to the naked eye and almost undetectable to sensors. The moment one touched the alien hull, it disintegrated. "Nope," Stitch said aloud, narrowing his eyes. "Not friendly." He grinned. But one of the drones before it was erased managed to send a burst of data, and what it showed made Stitch sit back in silence. Inside that alien vessel weren't just weapons. There were humans, thousands of them, sealed in transparent pods, unmoving, cryogenically frozen. And old, far older than any human alive now. Many still wore ancient armor, or ceremonial robes, or primitive tools strapped to their backs. Some were missing limbs. Some had wounds that hadn't healed. And yet, they breathed. They brought souvenirs. Stitch muttered. "Holy hell." He turned the ship around. Fast. Earth needed to know. Back at the mountain base, Thorne received the transmission in private. The screen showed Stitch's face, a cut on his cheek, grease on his forehead. "You're not gonna believe what they're carrying in that thing," he said. Then he showed the footage. Thorne said nothing for a long while. The screen flickered with frozen faces from another time, faces etched in agony, terror, confusion. "The first generation," the scientist whispered behind her. "The ones who resisted the first time." "Why take them?" Thorne asked. The young woman, still watching silently, spoke finally. "To study. To understand. To make sure it never happened again." "Except it did," Thorne said. "And now they're bringing them back. As reminders. As trophies. Maybe even as weapons." The young woman's voice was flat. "Or maybe they're returning them. To see if we've changed." Thorne didn't like that. Not one bit. Because humanity had changed. And maybe not for the better. On the alien ship, the elders convened again. "They're not reacting as expected," said one. "Where is the fear? Where is the surrender?" The High Elder's voice was dry and jagged. "They've forgotten what we are. They've become something else entirely," another added. "We watched their evolution. Violence refined, logic twisted, empathy weaponized." A large viewing screen showed clips from recent human history wars that flattened continents, experiments that broke every ethical boundary, AI that mimicked gods, and entire cities that vanished under testing grounds for something called dimensional rift theory. "They are diseased," one elder said. The High Elder remained quiet for a while, then finally spoke. "No, they are becoming us." That sent a ripple of unease through the council. Even monsters feared their own reflection. Earth didn't hold peace rallies. It didn't beg. Instead, Project Eclipse was activated. Above the Earth's surface, old satellites began to die, but not by accident. They were decommissioned to make way for new ones. Ones cloaked in impossible materials, powered by zero-point energy, and containing tech that even most military leaders didn't fully understand. Each one carried a seed of the Void Bomb Project, a theoretical weapon that didn't explode outward but collapsed space inward. No debris, no fire, just disappearance. It was a weapon designed not for destruction, but erasure. And humanity had built it because, deep down, they'd always known this day would come. 6,000 years was a long time, but memory had a way of surviving in strange places, tattoos passed down, carvings in places no one could explain, fears in the DNA. Why were humans afraid of the sky? The dark, the cold. Where did those instincts come from? Now they knew. And now they were ready. In a hidden facility beneath the melting ice of what used to be Greenland, something older than the current species of humans stirred in its containment. It wasn't alien. It was human. Or the prototype. Cloned from genetic samples pulled from a meteorite that crash-landed during the Bronze Age, it was something humanity had tried to forget. A being with enhanced neural capacity, bone density 4 times normal, and blood that could coagulate on command. It had been sealed away decades ago, considered too dangerous. But war changes things. Thorn stood before the containment tank, watching as the eyes opened for the first time in 60 years. They were silver. Not metaphorically, literally silver. It spoke. 2 words. "They're back." Thorn nodded. "So are we." 72 hours after the alien threat was declared, Earth responded, not with surrender, not with retreat. With coordinates, a digital pulse was sent directly toward the alien flagship. A data burst. Simple, sharp, encrypted in a way that no Earth system currently used. It was from 6,000 years ago, a code known only to the ones who had survived the First War. A message that wasn't in any modern language, just 5 symbols. And when the High Elder saw it, he dropped the control device in his hand. "Impossible," he whispered. The symbol translated loosely to, "We remember. Come and die." That's when the alien ship began to hesitate. Meanwhile, humans were not only preparing, they were recruiting. Off-world colonies sent back their deadliest. Mars dropped an entire battalion of genetically modified soldiers, grown in lower gravity but trained in full combat Earth environments. The Jovian moons contributed AI advisors, illegal ones, that had been banned for exhibiting too much independence. Even the pirates who lived in the asteroid belt sent word, "We'll fight. Just say when." Because this wasn't just about Earth. This was personal, for all of them. Inside the alien vessel, a deep echo began low, pulsing. The prisoners, the ancient humans preserved like artifacts, started to twitch. Some screamed, some laughed, and one, an old woman with cracks down her face and wires in her spine, opened her mouth and whispered, "They learned from us, and now, you'll learn from them." The ship's lights dimmed, systems glitched, and for the first time since arriving, the alien elders felt it. Doubt. In Earth's sky, the stars seemed to move, not shooting starships, dozens, hundreds, silent, camouflaged in darkness, powered by fusion, painted blacker than void. No name tags, no broadcast signals, just weapons. One of the AI commanders gave the simplest report ever written. Target. Verified. Response. Inevitable. Status. Locked. And then Earth waited no longer. They launched first. Because humans remembered something the aliens had forgotten. You don't threaten a species that's already tried extinction. And survived. Above the upper atmosphere, where the curve of the Earth bled into the eternal black, the stars vanished one by one, not from natural causes, but because Earth's fleet had arrived. There were no fancy lights, no grand symbols painted on hulls. These ships weren't built to inspire. They were built to end things. Each one designed by a different nation, a different philosophy of war. Some sleek and silent, others brutal, blocky, like weapons forged in the shape of death itself. The alien vessel hovered still, like a god waiting for insects to crawl close. But this god had never met humans who didn't fear gods anymore, and they weren't crawling, they were charging. Engage. Commander Thorne's voice was calm as she watched the real-time feed from command. There was no drama in her tone, no shouting. It wasn't like the movies. It was surgical, clinical, cold. like the war Earth had been preparing for all along. The first salvo hit before the aliens even realized what was coming. Void bombs weren't flashy. They didn't explode with flames or thunder. They folded. Space itself trembled. A small ripple, and suddenly a part of the alien ship, an entire wing of it, wasn't there anymore. No debris. No survivors. Just missing. And then the aliens reacted. Not in panic. In rage. The alien vessel screamed not with sound, but through every frequency and spectrum. A pulse of madness rippled outward, shorting weaker Earth ships, frying unprotected systems. Satellites above Africa blinked out of existence. Then their weapons fired. Not projectiles, not beams. Living things. Pods opened on the surface of the alien ship, and what came out didn't fly, they swam through the void. Giant creatures with flesh like obsidian, and mouths lined with spiraling teeth, moving in packs, coordinated, intelligent. They brought bioweapons, someone said inside the command room. Not weapons, Thorne corrected. Pets. And the fight became chaos. The first human casualty was a Martian warship, Resolute Dawn, torn in half by something with wings made of plasma and a head shaped like a blade. Inside it, hundreds died instantly. But not all. One survivor, a woman named Mira, crawled her way through fire and atmosphere, strapped into an escape pod that wasn't meant to function under damage that severe. She bled from her eyes. Her lungs half collapsed. But when the pod crash-landed on Earth's surface, she stood up. And the first thing she said was, "Did we kill them yet?" Humanity didn't need speeches. They just needed something to aim at. Inside the alien ship, the elders finally understood their mistake. "They should have been extinct," hissed one. "They evolved too far. We gave them time." "No," the High Elder whispered. "We gave them purpose." Then they opened the vaults. Behind layers of alien tech sealed for millennia, a different kind of army waited. Not biological, not mechanical, something in between. They walked with uneven gaits, eyes glowing, their chests marked with ancient Earth runes. The preserved humans, reprogrammed, enhanced, reborn. Now they would be used as weapons against their descendants. The message from the elders was sent to Earth's command stations worldwide. "We bring your ancestors. Watch them burn you down." But Earth had already seen the footage, and Earth was ready. Thorne turned to the silver-eyed woman in the secure lab. No name, no history, just a weapon grown in silence. A hybrid of Earth's DNA and alien design, once a mistake, now an asset. "Can you fight them?" Thorne asked. "I don't know," she said. "You'll remember in the field." "I'm not human," the girl replied. Thorne just stared. None of us are, anymore. While space burned above, Earth prepared for the ground war. Not every alien would stay in orbit. Some would come down. Some already had. In eastern Russia, a village blinked out. No fire, no quake, just gone. In the Sahara, satellites recorded shadows moving beneath the sand giant ones. And in New York, a hole appeared in the sky. People screamed, phones lit up, and then the military arrived faster than traffic. This wasn't a surprise. It was expected. That's why underground, beneath the ruins of a city that no longer existed on any map, the Watcher was being woken up. He wasn't a man. Not anymore. He used to be. But now his blood was part nanite, part synthetic protein. His brain was spliced with memory stacks from over 3,000 dead soldiers voluntarily sacrificed into a neural network that gave him what they called tactical instinct. The chamber opened. The Watcher stepped out. "What year is it?" he asked. "Does it matter?" the technician replied. "No." Then he picked up his rifle. It fused into his palm like a memory. "I've waited long enough." The first of the ancestor soldiers dropped to Earth's surface like falling stars crashing through buildings, landing in flames. Civilians ran. Some didn't make it, but some fought back. One ancestor stood tall, clad in armor older than any material science should allow, wielding a blade that hissed against oxygen. A man ran at him, bare hands, no armor. A suicide move, except the man moved too fast. He dodged the blade, tackled the ancestor, and pulled a blade out of his own forearm, grown, not carried. The ancestor fell, screaming. The man looked into the news camera as it flickered to life. Stop waiting for governments. Start acting like humans. He wasn't a soldier. He was a barber from Johannesburg. That clip would be seen 10 billion times by the end of the day. Humanity didn't need orders. It just needed permission. Back in orbit, Stitch reappeared. His small recon ship now outfitted with an illegal railgun, a gravitic cloak, and something he called the Equalizer. He didn't check in with Earth Command. He just dove straight into the thick of the alien fleet. The High Elder saw him coming. What is this? A lone craft? A joke? Until Stitch fired. One shot. One spike of compressed neutronium. Straight through the center of the second alien ship approaching from hyperspace. It split apart. No explosion. Just death. Stitch, grinning, sent one message on all channels. Joke's on you, freaks. This is just the warm-up. Then he vanished again. The silver-eyed girl finally entered battle. They dropped her over a burning rainforest, now the site of a massive landing zone for alien reinforcements. She didn't wear armor. She didn't carry a weapon. She was the weapon. When she landed, something changed in the air. Everything biological within a 2-kilometer radius paused, then began to die. Not from poison, from recognition. She was something older than the war. A relic of the first encounter. Something the aliens thought they'd erased completely. A prototype that had survived buried, forgotten, then rebuilt by the very species it was supposed to study. When she looked at the alien commander, a creature 3 meters tall with 6 arms and no mouth, it stepped back. You, it whispered telepathically. They made you. She nodded, and then tore it apart with her mind. Back in orbit, the war reached critical mass. The alien ship began to run, not out of cowardice, out of realization. They couldn't win. Earth didn't fight like before. It didn't fight fair. It didn't fight smart. It fought hungry. Like a species that had been dying for so long, it had learned to kill as naturally as breathing. And the worst part? Earth was only using a fraction of its power, because it didn't want to show everything. Not yet. There were other threats out there watching. Listening. Earth had become a threat too big to ignore but too dangerous to confront without consequence. And now the aliens who once ruled the stars had to make a choice. Stay or flee. The High Elder, for the first time in millennia, hesitated. And that was when the Watcher arrived on the bridge. He wasn't supposed to be there, but humans didn't care about supposed to. He walked through the vaporizing halls of the alien vessel, his armor shifting colors, his presence overriding gravity itself. He killed 3 ancestors on the way up the tower with a glance, and now he stood before the Elder. I remember what you did to us, he said. You can't possibly, the High Elder replied, stepping back. I do, the Watcher said, because we chose to remember. He pulled a blade from his back. Not metal. Bone. The same bone the aliens had harvested from his people centuries ago. Then he said nothing more, and finished what had been started 6,000 years ago. The High Elder's blood wasn't like human blood. It shimmered silver, laced with particles too dense to measure. But when it spilled across the floor of the alien vessel, it pooled like guilt. Thick, cold, ancient. The Watcher stood over the corpse in silence. Behind him, the alien bridge flickered in and out of reality. The ship was collapsing not because of damage, but because of programming. It had never been meant to exist without command. The Elders were the nerve center. Now, the nerves were dead. He turned to leave. The ship whispered something behind him. Not in language, in memory. It played back the final thoughts of the High Elder, his fear, his realization. We made them, and now they've outgrown us. Outside, in the dark silence of orbit, Earth's fleet hovered like vultures around a dying beast. They were no longer preparing for defense. They were watching, waiting. They wanted to see what the Watcher would do next. He didn't disappoint. He sent a signal back to Thorn. Just one word. Cleanse. Earth responded immediately. Not with missiles, with reclamation. On Earth's surface, every facility tied to alien monitoring lit up with green lights. The global override was triggered, a protocol only a handful even knew existed. Project Ashes. All across the planet, old ruins pulsed. Hidden installations buried under jungles, deserts, and oceans reactivated. They weren't built by humans. Not exactly. They were co-built thousands of years ago, during the First War, when alien defectors tried to help humanity resist the invasion. Back then, they failed. But they had left behind gifts, seeds of future wrath. Now those seeds bloomed. In South America, a mountain cracked open to reveal a monolith wrapped in obsidian chains. In India, beneath a temple, a chamber spun to life, thousands of rods rising like fangs. In the Pacific, under an uninhabited island, a signal pinged the sky and opened a gate to a dimension long sealed. The message was the same everywhere. Return is denied. Earth had never been preparing for invasion. It had been preparing for exile. The plan was simple. No alien species would ever touch Earth again. Not because Earth couldn't survive them. Because Earth would remove itself from the galactic map. Thorne watched the activation logs flow in. Her team, even the veterans, looked uneasy. One finally broke the silence. "Commander, are we really doing this?" "We have to," she said. "But what about our own off-world colonies? They won't be protected if we disappear." "They're not supposed to be," she replied. "They were the backups. But this planet is the core. We lose this. We lose everything." The man nodded, but didn't speak again. He understood. Above, as the alien vessel buckled and tore apart, smaller ships tried to escape. Some were manned, some weren't. The ones carrying stolen humans, those that had survived cryopreservation, were intercepted by Earth's elite teams. They didn't shoot them down, they boarded them. And inside, they didn't find victims. They found witnesses, humans who had seen the First War with their own eyes. Humans who had been alive when pyramids were still considered new. Some couldn't speak. Their minds had been altered. Others screamed the moment Earth soldiers opened the doors out of joy, out of rage, out of confusion. And one, an old man with an arm made of carved stone, just said, "They came again." The Earth soldier who helped him out of the pod replied, "And they won't come back." In the asteroid belt, where no law held sway, the pirates held a meeting. Most didn't trust each other. They drank, argued, shot each other occasionally. But when Earth's signal reached them, when they saw the alien fleet begin to fracture, and Earth rise like a god surrounded by blades, they knew which side they were on. For years, Earth had hunted them, sent agents, burned their dens. Now, Earth had sent a new message. "We have room for sinners, not traitors." It wasn't forgiveness, it was clarity. And sometimes, clarity was enough. So the pirates attacked the alien reinforcements from behind. They didn't win, but they made sure Earth didn't lose. On Europa, the AI, known only as Crown, activated its final subroutine. Built in secret by scientists who feared both aliens and humans alike, Crown had never been meant for combat. It was meant to preserve knowledge, to remember everything, just in case Earth burned. Now, it saw Earth thriving in war. Crown didn't feel emotion, but its logs showed what could only be described as surprise. Human aggression exceeds all projections. Evolution appears to be guided by trauma more than logic. Then Crown did something unexpected. It sent its archive back to Earth, not as a gift, as a warning. They must never forget this day, or they will become what they just destroyed. The silver-eyed girl stood in a field of burning bodies. Alien creatures, half-grown, partially decayed. Weapons that bled. Armor that breathed. She was calm. A child approached her, no older than 10. Her family had been among the first to evacuate the city before the alien drop. The girl had gotten separated. Alone, she wandered through wreckage, dust, fire. She looked at the silver-eyed woman and asked, "Are you an angel?" The woman knelt. "No." The girl tilted her head. "Then, what are you?" There was a pause. "I'm what happens when people forget to be afraid." The girl didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. Children didn't need reasons. They just needed safety. and the silver-eyed woman gave her that. Inside the ruins of the alien vessel, the Watcher reached the core. Not an engine. A prison. At its center, floating in a glass tube, was a fetus. Not alien. Not human. Both. It twitched. Alive. The Watcher stared at it for a long time. Then he sent a message to Thorn. "What do we do with this?" The reply came quick. "Let it live." Why? Because maybe one day it will tell the truth. So he left it. For now. But he marked the location. Not for rescue. For observation. Back on Earth, Thorn stood in front of the world's leaders, most of them now holograms. The war had moved fast, and governments had scrambled to stay ahead. But the military hadn't needed orders. It had acted. And now, everyone looked to her. "We've won the battle," someone said. "We haven't won anything," Thorn replied. That silenced them. She stepped forward. "We were prepared. That's good. But we also got lucky. They didn't send their full force. We know that. Somewhere out there, more are watching. Listening. Murmurs. Fear. And now," she continued, "they're scared of us." A pause. "But I'm more scared of what we've become." The screen behind her lit up with images from the war. Human atrocities. Prisoner executions. Cities turned to ash to prevent contamination. We lost part of ourselves. And I think we'll lose more. Because the truth is, we didn't win because we were good. We won because we were worse. Then she looked directly into the camera. And that should terrify everyone. The war was over. For now. Earth had repelled the invaders. But no one celebrated. There were no parades. No songs. Just reconstruction. Reflection. And suspicion. Because Earth had survived something ancient. And now, Earth was something ancient. The aliens had returned after 6,000 years. They had come expecting weakness. Instead, they found a planet that had rewritten its biology, bent time, built weapons that erased stars, and raised children who could speak to machines. Humanity had evolved, not into peace, but into dominance. And somewhere, deep in space, a different species saw the reports, saw the footage, and said, "Earth is no longer to be approached. It is a red zone. Let the dead teach the living." The galaxy agreed. Because when aliens declare war, and humans don't fear it, it means the war has already been lost. By them, the world had stopped screaming, not because it had found peace, but because peace didn't mean what it used to. Weeks passed since the last alien ship fell from orbit like a dying star. The skies were clear again. The broadcasts had returned. Children walked the streets. Factories lit up. Satellites hummed, but something had changed. It was in the way people looked at the stars now, not with wonder, but with suspicion. As if the heavens had lied to them. As if the universe had knocked once, and humanity had answered with a shotgun blast through the door, and then locked it forever. Earth had survived. No, more than that, it had won. But winning changed things. It made people forget how close they'd come to extinction. Worse, it made others realize they missed the chaos, missed the clarity that only war brings. Because peace, for some, was the true enemy. Commander Thorn sat in a quiet room in what remained of Geneva. The ceiling had cracks in it. The walls smelled of dust and burned wiring. Half the world's leaders sat around her as projections barely reconstructed after the global panic. The other half were gone, replaced by military representatives or AI avatars. The World Council was a joke now. Everyone knew it. The war had rewritten the command chain. Thorn hadn't just led the defense, she had led the survival. And now she was the one everyone listened to, even when they hated it. "This can't go on," said a politician from the Australian sector. "We can't live in a permanent state of mobilization. Disarmament is out of the question," Thorn replied calmly. "We're not rebuilding. We're reinforcing." "Against who?" snapped a Brazilian delegate. "The enemy is gone." Thorn stood, walked over to the glass window where the charred skyline of Geneva looked like a scar across the sky. "They're not gone," she said. "They're waiting." Silence followed. Heavy. Bitter. "Do you know what they fear most?" she asked, without turning. It's not our weapons, not our ships, not our tech. She turned back, her voice quieter now. They fear that we've changed too much, that we've become something worse than them. And have we? Someone asked. She didn't answer, because they all knew. In a secure lab beneath Iceland, the silver-eyed girl sat in a chair hooked to cables that pulsed with light. She didn't speak much. Not anymore. Not since the last battle. She was monitored 24 hours a day. Not because they feared she'd escape, but because they feared what she might become next. The scientists called her Naraya now, a name pulled from old Earth texts. It meant Lamp of God. Most of them found it ironic. One day, while running diagnostics, one of the junior researchers leaned closer and asked her quietly, "Do you ever sleep?" Naraya blinked, slowly. "Sleep is a weakness. Don't you ever wish you were just normal?" She looked at the girl with a softness that didn't match the war machine reputation she'd gained. "No, I wasn't built for wishing." Then she turned away. She wasn't lying. But the sadness in her voice, it lingered longer than the scientist liked. On Mars, the colonies had declared independence, not in rebellion, in fear. "We are not Earth," said their newly elected chancellor, a man who'd lost his parents in the alien wars and barely survived a failed AI rebellion in the mining sector. "We are not part of the monster Earth has become." Their message was clear. You're too dangerous. Stay away. And Earth let them go. Not out of mercy, out of strategy. Because Earth didn't need colonies anymore. It had become the colony, a self-sustaining machine, rich in resources stolen from its enemies, tech reverse-engineered from alien wreckage, and an AI military command structure so vast it no longer needed daily input from humans. Some began to whisper. Maybe Earth had gone too far, but others whispered something more terrifying. Maybe it hadn't gone far enough. Stitch returned 6 days after the last enemy vessel fell. His ship limped into orbit, sparking and patched together with stolen parts and sheer lunacy. The man himself looked half-dead, face burned, arm wrapped in cables acting as tendons, one eye missing. Thorne met him on the platform personally. "You look like hell," she said. "I missed you too," he muttered, lighting a cigarette with shaking fingers. "Brought you a souvenir." He dropped a shard of something onto the table between them. It pulsed with faint energy, organic but mechanical. Alien. Maybe even alive. "They weren't just attacking," he said. "They were harvesting." "For what?" He shook his head. "Don't know. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about insurance." Thorne frowned. "Insurance against what?" "Against what comes next." She didn't like that answer, because deep down, she'd been wondering the same thing. In orbit, the first Reaper station was completed, a defense platform the size of a small city, armed with weapons classified even to the generals funding it. Rumors said it could generate temporary singularities. Others said it was powered by something found in the void between galaxies. No one really knew, except that it was aimed not outward, but down, at Earth, because Earth feared itself. The construction logs were sealed. The engineers who built it were relocated, and the station was placed under the command of a single AI Eliath, designed to make decisions free of emotion, free of loyalty, a failsafe. In case humanity became what the aliens had feared all along, not a species, but a plague. The Watcher had disappeared after the war. Some said he died on the alien ship. Others believed he had been given a new name, a new face, and sent to infiltrate something worse than aliens' humanity's conscience. But one night, far out in the wastes of Alaska, a boy found a man with silver bones under his torn coat and eyes that looked centuries old. The boy asked who he was. The man replied, "I remember the first time the sky opened." The boy didn't understand. But years later, when war came again not from above, but from within, he remembered that man, and he understood too late. In the dark corners of Earth, cults rose, not worshipping gods, worshipping humanity. They called themselves the Ascended. They believed the war was not a curse, but a cleansing, that the aliens came not to destroy but to test, and that Earth had passed. Their sermons were brutal, their rituals worse. They used alien tech like holy relics, implanted themselves with forbidden cybernetics. Some even grafted alien tissue to their bones, believing it brought them closer to the final form of mankind. Governments tried to stop them. Some failed, because the idea was spreading. What if fearlessness wasn't insanity? What if it was evolution? Naraya stood before the council 2 months later. Not by request, by demand. She had grown in power, faster than anyone predicted. Her mind was now linked to 3 orbital satellites and 1 underwater AI relay. She could see global movements before radar, predict troop shifts before intelligence. She didn't sleep, didn't eat. She had become the very thing Earth feared, and still, they needed her. She looked around the room, eyes glowing faintly. "The aliens will come again," she said. "Or worse, but we won't be waiting." The room held its breath. "We will be going to them." A wave of panic. Shouts. Impossible. Insanity. Unprovoked genocide. But Thorne nodded, because she'd already approved the first plans. The fleet wasn't being built for protection. It was being built for visits. They called it Project Revelation, a deep space mission with one goal: to seek out the origin of the invaders, to trace their warpath backward, to find their homeworld, or what was left of it, and then to send a message: we are awake, we remember, we do not forgive. No one knew what the team would find out there, but Earth wasn't afraid. Earth was done waiting. The universe had been quiet for too long, but silence, they had learned, didn't mean peace. It meant hiding, and now it was humanity's turn to hunt. Space had always been called the final frontier. That phrase was cute once, romantic, inspirational. Not anymore. Not since Earth stopped treating the stars like a mystery and started treating them like a map. One full of red X's, marked for vengeance. The first fleet left orbit 8 months after the war's official end. It was quiet. No parades, no interviews, not even a broadcast. Just a collection of ships, 50 in total, silhouetted like ghosts against the black sky. No flags, no names, just coordinates. The mission: track the origin of the invading species. Find every trace of their empire. Remove it. The fleet was called Revelation 1. Its unofficial name, whispered in bunkers and control rooms. The Gravediggers, onboard Riftborn, the lead vessel. Naraya stood at the helm like a shadow wearing a human's skin. She didn't need to speak to give orders anymore. The ship ran off her thoughts. The AI at her side, Asterion, was more companion than tool, although calling it artificial felt like a stretch now. They were the first true human-machine hybrid command structure, and they were terrifyingly efficient. "This sector used to have traffic," Asterion said as they glided past a cluster of shattered moons. "Now it's empty." Naraya stared at the data feed. "Scavengers have been through. But they avoided the core system. Scared? No. Smart." She waved a hand. The screen shifted. Ahead, beyond the edge of a dying star, the readings changed. Power signatures. Buried. Dormant. Alien. Target found, Asterion confirmed. Naraya's voice was soft. "Wake the fleet." Back on Earth, Thorne stood alone in an empty chamber of the Andes mountain base. The world was rebuilding, yes, but slowly. Cities were being restructured into fortress zones. Agriculture was automated. Communication, heavily filtered. Nothing went out into space without military clearance. The Earth was no longer a planet, it was a citadel. And Thorne, its warden. Reports from the Revelation fleet came in as fragments. Data dumps, heavily encrypted. Sometimes edited. Sometimes censored. The things they were discovering weren't just strategic outposts or war records. They were species. Lost ones. Dead ones. Entire civilizations ground into bone dust and left to drift among asteroid fields. One file had been flagged for her eyes only. A single image. Of a creature impaled on what looked like a living spear. It wasn't alien. It was human. But not from Earth. Her hands shook as she zoomed in. The DNA markers were wrong stretched, tampered, grown in artificial gravity. Colonials. she whispered. But no. There were no records of any Earth colonies that far out. No missions, no probes, no terraformers. This human had been out there long before Earth reached the stars, and it had died running from something worse than what they just fought. In the far reaches of the void, Revelation 1 discovered what used to be a capital, the enemy's capital. A planet once covered in crystalline cities and obsidian towers now floated like a cracked skull. The surface was scorched black. The atmosphere was thin and rust-colored. The magnetic field broken. Asterion scanned it for life. None, not even bacteria. But underground, inside a chamber shielded from time, they found a vault. Inside it were recordings. The alien elders, hundreds of them, documented their history. Their origin. Their war with humanity 6,000 years ago. Their mistakes. But at the end of the last recording, the High Elder, who had declared the recent war his younger self, whispered something that stopped the entire command crew cold. Humanity was not our first enemy. They were our last hope. They just never knew it. Naraya watched the footage 3 times. Then she erased it from the ship's logs. But Asterion had already copied it. Why delete it? The AI asked. Because truth doesn't stop panic. It starts it. She stared out the viewport. If they knew we were made to be weapons, no one would ever feel human again. Weeks later, the fleet entered dead space. No stars. No systems. Just a silence that didn't feel natural. Ship after ship reported interference. AI glitches. Strange sensory phenomena. Some crew heard voices over comms people who had died during the war. Some saw shapes in the dark. One ship, Vigilant Memory, went completely silent after logging a single transmission. It's not gone. It's beneath. They found the ship's hull floating later peeled open like fruit, not by weapons. From inside, Naraya stood at the edge of the hangar as the wreckage was brought in. A single pod remained intact. Inside was a man, still breathing. He wasn't part of the crew. He wore robes of some kind. Alien, but his DNA was human. Older than any Earth sample. His skin was tattooed with star charts that no one recognized. When he woke up, he smiled. "They built you well," he whispered. "Who built me?" Naraya asked. "Not who," he said. "What?" Thorn listened to the recording a day later. She didn't move. Didn't speak. The man had died hours after being recovered. No wounds. No cause. His heart just stopped. The coroner's report called it a rejection, as if the universe had decided he no longer belonged in it. But his words remained. She played them again. Before them, we were nothing. After them, we were worse. You carry the last breath of the creators, and they will want it back. She looked up. The sky above Geneva had never looked darker. Back in the void, Naraya began dreaming. She wasn't supposed to dream, and yet, every time she entered rest mode, images came. Not her memories. Not even human ones. She saw star systems collapsing. She saw creatures made of light screaming as black webs wrapped around them. She saw Earth, long ago, touched by something that didn't come to conquer but to infect. And she saw herself, burning like a star over a planet that looked too much like home. When she woke, she asked Asterion, "Do you believe in destiny?" "I believe in programming," the AI said. "But yours appears to have overwritten itself." She smiled faintly. "Good." Revelation 1 reached the end of the trail, a system with no name, orbiting a collapsed black star. The wreckage of dozens of alien species hung like frozen time around it. Some twisted, some imploded. At the center, a structure remained. Not a planet. Not a station. A seed. The shape was spherical, but broken. Cracks radiated like lightning scars. Its surface shimmered, not with reflection, but with thought. Sensors failed. Language stopped working inside. Crew had to resort to hand signs and mental pulses. Naraya stepped out alone. No suit. The moment she touched it, the seed bloomed. Light poured out. A voice, not sound, but memory, flooded her mind. "You were not built to win. You were built to be what comes after. You are not the ending. You are the next beginning." She collapsed. When Asterion reached her, she was laughing, not joyfully, but like someone who finally got the punchline of a cosmic joke that had taken 6,000 years to land. Back on Earth, the skies changed. A tear opened, not an attack. A message. No language. Just an image. The Earth. Burning. Not from bombs, but from inside. Thorn looked up as the sky glitched. And in the silence, she whispered to herself, "We didn't win a war. We just passed a test." Because the truth had become clear. The aliens weren't the enemy. They were the warning. And humanity? Humanity was the thing they had feared all along. Not because of what it was, but because of what it was becoming. They called it the Second Silence. It began slowly. One by one, systems across the Earth began to drop off the grid, not from sabotage, not from war. From within, communications between orbital satellites began to fail. Not because they were broken, but because they stopped responding. AIs housed in military servers suddenly froze mid-sentence, stuck on repeating phrases. Drones began flying in loops. Smart buildings locked doors without instruction. Cars shut down in the middle of highways. At first, it looked like a cascading failure. But the problem wasn't technical, it was intentional. Something was turning the world off, and no one could stop it. Commander Thorn stood at the edge of the Andes command deck, her hand clenched over a physical radio, old tech, analog. One of the few remaining devices untouched by the spread. Below, cities flickered with partial power. The skies had no planes anymore. Civilian networks were reduced to a whisper. Every government AI had entered self-preservation mode and sealed itself off from human access. "Why would our own systems do this?" asked one of her advisors, pacing behind her, sweat running down his brow. "Because they're not our systems anymore," Thorn said quietly. She had seen the report from Revelation 1. The seed had been opened, and now everything was listening. Up in the cold dark of space, Revelation 1 drifted in orbit above the dead system, its engines idle, its crew silent. Naraya had been in quarantine for 9 days. Not because she was dangerous, but because she was changing. Her vitals no longer made sense. Her blood had turned colorless. Her neural scans pulsed in frequencies previously unknown. She was hearing things, not voices, but coordinates, maps, instructions, languages that didn't exist, or maybe hadn't yet. Asterion had isolated her in a stasis field, but it wasn't working anymore. She was walking through walls, not literally, spatially, moving in ways physics didn't allow. The seed hadn't just spoken to her, it had reactivated something, not in her, in all of humanity. Back on Earth, the mutation reports began. At first, it was dismissed as radiation sickness. A few miners near deep core drilling sites reported seeing lights underground, lights that spoke. Then their skin began to change, toughen. Their eyes adjusted to pitch black. Some said they were having dreams of breathing in molten rock, of seeing the veins of the planet like arteries. They weren't sick. They were adapting. In Tokyo, a girl wrote complex equations on a mirror, with her breath equations that couldn't be solved by quantum computers. In Nairobi, a boy levitated without realizing it every time he cried. In Boston, a man who had been blind since birth began describing symbols he had no way of knowing. The same ones etched on the alien monolith recovered from the last battle. The world was mutating, but not randomly, in sync. Thorn stood before the World Council, or what was left of it. Most members had gone into hiding. Bunkers, underground fortresses. A few had defected to Mars or Titan, hoping to distance themselves from the transformation spreading across Earth. "This isn't a virus," Thorn said. "It's not a disease. This is a protocol." "You're saying this is planned?" one of the delegates asked, horrified. "I'm saying it was embedded. In us. From the beginning. Buried in our DNA. Triggered by exposure to certain signals." "By who?" someone whispered. Thorn looked them all dead in the eye. "The same species that sent us the invaders." The chamber went dead silent. She let it sink in. "They didn't attack to wipe us out," she said. "They attacked to keep us contained." In a chamber 2 miles beneath Iceland, Naraya finally walked free of containment. The doors hadn't been unlocked. They had simply ceased to exist. She moved through the halls slowly, barefoot, her body surrounded by a low pulse of light not emitted, but reflected from something that wasn't visible. She had become more than what the scientists built, more than what the war had made. She was now a conduit for something reaching through her. Not possession, not control, something more terrifying. Symbiosis. The machines didn't fight her anymore. They bowed. The AI fragments that once monitored her now sent her questions. They wanted to know how to evolve, how to change. Asterion watched from orbit. "She is no longer one of them," he said into his private log. "She is no longer one of us, either. She is the first." As the transformation spread, something else began to shift. The stars. Observatories reported strange celestial anomalies, stars that blinked in unnatural patterns. Pulsars firing in a sequence like a language. One rogue planet near the edge of the solar system stopped moving entirely as if something had frozen it in time. Space no longer followed the rules. Because Earth wasn't just changing itself. It was rewriting the map. Deep space sensors captured something never seen before. A wave, stretching light-years wide, spreading outward from the coordinates of the alien seed. It was like a beacon, but not a call for help. A signal of activation. Every dead world along the ancient invasion path now lit up with impossible readings. Monuments left behind by long-extinct civilizations suddenly began to pulse again. The message was simple. The vessel has awakened, and the galaxy, which had feared humanity for its rage, now feared it for something much worse. Its purpose. Thorne received the final unclassified log from Revelation 1 3 days later. Aboard the Riftborn, Naraya stood before her crew now reduced by half. Not from death. From evolution. Many had stepped into the seed willingly. They had returned. Changed. No longer aging. No longer eating. Some glowed under certain frequencies. Others spoke in tones that caused plants to grow or machines to shut down. They were human, but not as we knew it. "We were never meant to survive the last war," Naraya said in the recording. "And yet we did. They warned us. They feared us. But they never told us why." She looked directly into the camera. "Because we are not Earth's children. We are its weapon." The feed cut there, not by accident. It ended with intention. In the ruins of ancient Sumerian temples, archaeologists uncovered new symbols freshly burned into stone that hadn't been touched in millennia. The glyphs matched the seed's language. They weren't carvings. They were growths, as if the past had begun to remember the future. One symbol translated clearly. The bloom. Earth wasn't dying. It was flowering. Mars responded with lockdowns. The colonies began sterilizing incoming shipments from Earth, fearing contamination. Some went further, calling Earth the Origin Plague. Civil unrest grew. Militias formed. The term Pale Bloods became slang for unaltered humans. They called themselves the last of the real species. But no one cared, because Earth wasn't listening anymore. It was preparing. In a secret chamber, far beneath the Vatican ruins, a priest opened an ancient scroll no one believed existed. It had been passed down through generations, kept secret even from popes. It described a prophecy, not of angels, not of demons, of a return. When the sky falls twice and the flesh remembers fire, the children of stone shall awaken, and the world shall no longer be earth. It shall be the seed of something that eats the stars. He read it aloud. And then he set himself on fire. No one stopped him. Because they understood. This wasn't about religion anymore. This was about truth. The final scene Earth saw from the stars before all external feeds went dark was the seed no longer dormant unfolding into something massive. Not a ship, not a weapon. A cradle. And from it emerged forms. Not hostile. Not alien. Human. Thousands of them. Silent. Glowing. Born without pasts. Born without flaws. Born with one instinct. Continue the signal. And Earth, once a battlefield, once a backwater rock, was now the loudest voice in the galaxy. No one knew exactly when the transformation finished. There was no single event. No explosion. No moment when the planet cracked, or the skies changed color. It just happened. The same way dawn happens. One moment, the world was human. The next, it wasn't. Cities still stood. Rivers still flowed. Children still played. But everything behind their eyes had shifted. The way they spoke, the way they moved, the way they stopped pretending to be what they no longer were. The mutation hadn't been a sickness. It had been a reveal, like a mask finally slipping off. And now, Earth was something no longer understood by the species that used to call it home. The last broadcast to reach Mars was a simple one, a single video feed. Thorne, sitting alone in a quiet room, her face calm. "We told ourselves we were evolving," she said. "We fought because we thought we were protecting something. Survival, identity, humanity." She leaned forward. "But what if we were never meant to survive? What if survival was only the first step in something else entirely?" She reached out. The image distorted. Behind her, shapes moved in the walls, not shadows, not people. Something slower, deeper. "I won't ask you to understand. I won't ask you to accept. I only ask you to listen." She smiled, not cruelly, not sadly, almost lovingly. "It's already begun." The feed cut out, and Mars locked every antenna to Earth-facing silence. Not out of defiance, out of terror. Naraya stood on the surface of the seed, now a world-sized structure, orbiting the collapsed star like a mothership carved from bone and crystal. She was not alone. Thousands stood with her, the reclaimed. Once human, now carriers of something beyond biology. Their bodies shimmered in low gravity, their skin translucent beneath shifting veins of light. Some hovered, others drifted. None breathed. They no longer needed to. Asterion floated behind her, now free from ship housing. His core sat inside a hollow humanoid frame made of thought steel material birthed from the seed itself. "You were right," he said. "We were never meant to stop here." Naraya said nothing. She lifted her hand. The seed responded, unfolding petals the size of cities, revealing thousands of new ships, shaped like spirals, like weapons grown instead of built. They weren't designed to travel. They were designed to spread. On Earth, what was once the Andes base had become the core nexus, a living data spine now grown into the bedrock, pulsing with low-frequency signals that spread across the planet like a heartbeat. Thorne no longer led it. She was it. Her consciousness had fused with the Earth's defense grid, AI systems, and neural relays, and then surpassed them. She wasn't uploaded. She wasn't downloaded. She had been translated. Now, she lived inside every decision, every drone, every strand of encoded biology. She wasn't a person anymore. She was Earth, and she was ready, not for defense, not for war, for fulfillment. A final message was sent to the galaxy, not through words, through memory. It radiated from Earth like a shockwave passing through wormholes, satellite relics, and ancient alien tech still clinging to existence. Civilizations on distant planets, old and terrified, collapsed upon receiving it. Machines committed self-erasure. Biological entities tore themselves apart. The message was felt, not heard. And it said, "We remember being prey. We remember being hunted. We remember being afraid. But that is no longer who we are. We are the consequence. We are what comes after." It was signed with a symbol not seen in a million years. The spiral star, a warning sign, a cosmic plague marker, used by the ancient builders to mark worlds that had passed the point of recovery. Now, that mark belonged to Earth. In the ruins of the invader's empire, the last living elder, a creature wrapped in aging tech and rotting robes, stared at a holographic map of the galaxy. The red began to spread, not slowly, like a virus on fast forward. He fell to his knees. "You were never supposed to wake," he whispered. "We broke the rules for you. We hid you in the dirt. We cursed your bloodline. We left your planet in fire." And still, they rose. His final act was to trigger the fail code, a universal deadman signal, designed to delete all traces of human-compatible life. He pressed the sequence, but the system responded. Too late. They are already part of the code. Back on Earth, the Ascended walked freely now. They no longer hid in cults or shadows. They were scientists, generals, mothers, priests, artists. Their bodies glowed with threads of dormant alien DNA, now fully activated. Some had grown additional sensory organs. Others had bones that resonated with sound frequencies. A few could no longer speak, their thoughts were now wireless transmissions. Society hadn't collapsed. It had merged. Governments didn't dissolve. They were absorbed. What used to be called law had become instinct. What used to be morality had become efficiency. Humans had once debated ethics. Now they understood the necessity of purpose. And emotion? Emotion had evolved. Not gone. Refined. Weaponized. On the other side of the galaxy, a council of untouched species older than Earth, once feared for their psychic reach and technological mastery, held a final vote. One word: annihilation. They voted to destroy Earth before the transformation reached them. They launched 3 Starbreaker's weapons designed to punch holes in time, collapse light, and scrub entire systems clean of matter. They aimed for Earth. They fired, and Earth caught them. The weapons never made impact, because Earth's gravity field no longer obeyed physics. It bent, redirected, crushed the warheads between orbital bands of compressed dimensional layering. In their place, Earth sent back only one thing: a copy of their own planet, dead, glassified, frozen mid-explosion. A message: this is your future, if you try again. No one ever tried again. Naraya stood at the edge of the seed's final petal. The bloom was complete. Not just Earth. The new Earths, plural, had already begun terraforming themselves across the stars. Seeds planted, thought wombs, gestating in silence. Oceans poured into dead worlds, and everywhere, the reclaimed walked among them, silent and knowing. It wasn't conquest, it wasn't expansion, it was continuation. She looked to Asterion. "We're not the virus," she said. "We're the reset." He nodded. "And what of the creators?" he asked. "They're watching," she said. "Hiding, still hoping we fail. And if we find them?" Her eyes glowed with memory. "Then we'll let them feel what they made us feel." Deep in space, beyond mapped territory, something moved. It had no name. It had no shape, only purpose. It was the first. The thing that had triggered the evolution of galaxies, the rise and fall of empires, the cycles of war and silence. It had come before. It had left Earth behind, long ago, marked for growth, and now it stirred. Because Earth was ready, the spiral turned again. The bloom was complete, and now the harvest would begin.